my name is Kristen and this is Kristen Craves Books. So here we are with another wrap-up vlog. This one is for October. I'm starting this a little bit late. As always, I just haven't really had a chance to sit down and film. And then when I do film a video, I forget to do this update. So that is just what's happening. I have 4 books to talk to you about, which I think is a record. I don't think I've ever waited for 4 books in one of these videos, but they're all fresh in my mind, and so are October, and I can't wait to talk about them. The first one is Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cana. So this is my first book by her. I definitely want to go back and read The Haciendas. I think that you have to adjust your expectations of this because you hear vampires and you think that they're going to be a big part of the story, and they just aren't. They are in the backdrop. This is primarily a historical romance. It's a love story. It is second chance, friends to lovers. We are following these 2 characters who grew up together. They were falling in love, like young love, and then something happens where she's attacked by what is presumed to be a vampire, and he is told by her family that she was been killed, and he runs away because he can't stand it because he thinks that it is his fault. And then they reunite many years later. She is so angry that he left her, and he is shocked that she's still alive, and it all plays out from there. I think that her anger towards him is a little bit much because he thought she was dead, and she knows that at this point. She really holds on to that for longer than I thought she should have, but I did appreciate her. I love a good angst once in a while. There was a little bit of pining, some sweet moments. We get one pretty spicy scene in here, which I wasn't expecting and loved. And then in the background of all of this, they are on the run from these vampires. There's a lot more going on in here than just that. There are talks about politics. This is taking place at the Mexican-Texas border, and there are other enemies afoot besides these vampires. It really feels like the vampires are more of a metaphor. There are conversations in here because it is historical about women and the expectations of women, different classes, because her family thought that she deserved somebody better, which is just silly because he's fantastic. And then their fight for one another and defying your parents and just truly falling in love. So it was beautiful in a lot of ways and harrowing in others, and there are some good vampire moments in the background as well. Then I read another vampire book that is completely different from that one, and this is My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. This is a contemporary romance. It is like a witchy contemporary romance that I recommend, that I adore, but with vampires, and I loved it. And I know it's getting mixed opinions, and I understand why. I just think it's for a specific audience. If you like the witchy contemporary rom-coms that I tend to recommend and love, if you're okay with something silly and ridiculous where you have to suspend your disbelief, you'll like this. It's so quick, it's so fun. We're following a woman who lost her job and she has to move. She's being evicted, and she comes across an ad for a really nice apartment in a good area of Chicago, and they're asking $200 a month, and she almost wasn't going to email this person because that is ridiculous. There must be some kind of scam going on here, but she's that desperate that she does. She ends up moving in with this guy. He is so handsome, he's charming, he's a gentleman, he wears suits, and she one day comes home and finds that there's blood in the fridge. So that is the premise there. It's about their love story, and what I really liked about this was that we have a 3rd act conflict, but it's not really a breakup, which I appreciated. Some people think the end is ridiculous. It is ridiculous, but the whole book is ridiculous, and the end is so modern, and it made a lot of sense to me. There were some laugh out loud funny moments in this because he is a vampire who's been unconscious for 100 years, and the reason he wanted this roommate was to have somebody teach him how to adapt and fit in this modern world. But there's a lot of mishaps that happen, a lot of misunderstanding. He says the wrong thing, he doesn't understand stuff. There's some pop culture references in this. I just thought it was a blast. I had such a fun time with this. And honestly, the Goodreads rating for this kind of makes me angry, but I understand why it wouldn't work for everybody, but it really worked for me. One of my best books of the year, and I don't think people even know that this is coming out because she kind of kept it under wraps. This is The Witch Would Not by Olivia Atwater. Oh, I love this so much. It comes out in November, and this is one of her indie books. It's not being published by a traditional publisher, so maybe that's why it's been under the radar. I was lucky enough to get an e-arc. I flew through it. I loved it. It is set in the same world as Half a Soul, which she's really known for, but I don't think you have to read Half a Soul to appreciate this book. She said that you don't have to. I was looking at her Instagram, but there are some Easter eggs that I think you'd appreciate if you have read at least the first book. I haven't read the rest of the series. I'm sure there's more, but she does do a good job of using different ways of storytelling to give you the information you need to know from that series to understand what's happening in this new series. And if you know anything about Half a Soul, that is Regency romance. This new series is Victorian, and there's just something about the Victorian era that I like. It's more gothic and dark, and that certainly is true in this book. We're following a character named Winnie, who is a witch. She moves into this manor to be a governess to this young boy. She has a relationship with his grandmother, and she's doing the grandmother a favor, but she quickly realizes that there's something going on in this house. There's fae that live here. And the story kind of unravels from there. It gets really gory and it gets dark, and I just ate it up. I loved it. It's super atmospheric. It's everything that I like in a haunted house story. And I haven't read many or any haunted house stories where what's haunting the house is not a ghost, it's not a monster, it's fae. So I think that that was a really interesting angle, and I love what Olivia Atwater does with fae, because typically fae aren't my favorite thing. How many times can I say fae? But yeah, I love this. And then she has a familiar who is a dead cat. It's like a cat skull that she brings to life, who I loved. There's some great characters in here. There's a very, very slow burn romance that I don't think you should go into this expecting the romance that we get in Half a Soul, because the romance in Half a Soul is my favorite thing. My favorite thing about this book is something completely different, and this is the first book in a series, which is so exciting. I'll be talking about this book all the time. I just loved it that much. And then finally, I read Bad Witch Burning by Jessica Lewis. This is a hard book to talk about because although it's witchy, at the forefront, it's a YA hard-hitting contemporary. I think if you liked The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson, you will like this. It's that kind of tone where our main character, Cottrell, is facing a lot of hardships, and she just happens to have this power where she can bring people back from the dead. And she kind of falls into this power. She didn't really know she had this. She thought that she can communicate with the dead, but one day something horrific happens in the first 10% that involves the death of an animal. I just have to put that out there so that you know it ends up okay, but it's hard to read and I teared up. So through that situation, she realizes that she can raise people from the dead, and she decides to capitalize on this because she is living with her mother, who has an abusive boyfriend. Her mom's boyfriend abuses our main character. She is physically abused in this, so that is a huge content warning. She is being financially, emotionally, and physically abused, both by her mother, not physically, but her mom definitely takes advantage of her financially and emotionally. She knows what's going on in this house and ignores it. So that is a huge topic in here because our main character just loves her mom and wants to think the best of her mom, but she has to realize that she's being taken advantage of. It's so hard. And then she also has a best friend who's helping her. And the thing about this is she's raising these people from the dead. She doesn't know the consequences, but these consequences soon start to affect her, and her friend have to team up to fix everything that she's done. And there's no romance in here, which I thought was really interesting and kind of refreshing, to be honest with you. The main focus is on Cottrell trying to just survive. Check out the content warnings, but I thought it was so well done. I will definitely be checking out Monstrous by Jessica Lewis because I really liked her writing and her character work. So those are the first 4 books that I read in October. We will see where I go with this next. So I have 3 books to update you on right now, and I'm just gonna get the one that was a disappointment out of the way and have to look it up because I always say the title wrong. It's Muscles and Monsters. I always want to say Monsters and Muscles. I don't know why. This is by Ashley Bennett. If you know me, you know that I love the Mean Mishap series. My goal is to find books that are similar to that for myself and to maybe put together a recommendations list for everybody who also loves that series, but turns out that is hard to find. You would think from this cover that it would be perfect for that. You got the monster, she's holding a cupcake, it gives you the perfect vibes, but no, I so struggled with this one. I think a lot of that comes down to the dialogue. The internal dialogue for me was just kind of cringy, to be honest with you. I just don't think that people actually think that way, and if they do, I just don't relate to that. They meet on page 1, they're attracted to each other on page 1. There's no slow burn in this at all. The way they think about each other is just very sexual, and it just wasn't for me. What I love about the Mean Mishap series is that there is that deep emotional connection, and you can actually see why these two are together. I'm just not getting that in this one. She is a human, he is a werewolf, and he owns a gym. She owns a bakery. They meet one day, she ends up joining the gym. Things go from there. It's very quick. That's why I finished it in the first place, but I wasn't into it. I just don't think I'm into like the tail wagging thing either. I just don't think that this worked for me on any sort of level, which is too bad because I thought that there was potential, and a lot of people really do like this. So don't let me turn you off from trying it if it's something that you want to give a shot. People seem to really love the sequel as well, but I don't think I will be reading that one. It was just, I struggled with it from the beginning, and as I said, a lot of that had to do with the dialogue. Moving on to two absolute wins. The first one is Slewfoot by Brom. I finally read this. I know that this is a lot of people's favorite book of all time. A lot of people put this on their best books of the year list. The illustrations are amazing, and here the reading experience of this is next level. We are following a woman named Abatha and her husband, and they are working on the family farm, and the husband has a brother who is just awful, and I was just hating him the entire time, but obviously you're supposed to. This is very much historical fiction. It is a conversation about Puritans versus paganism, and you get the witch trials and all that stuff. So if you don't like that era, I don't know if I could confidently recommend this one to you, but it is so good. You're gonna cheer Abatha on. She ends up meeting a character named Slewfoot, and I won't say more than that. There are a lot of interesting side characters around Slewfoot as well, and it's about her standing up for herself. A lot of conversations about how women were treated at this time, and if you showed any sort of difference, how you might be labeled a witch, and very much about the church and religion and how stifling that can be, and about how women were treated, widows, and everything like that. And the last 20% of this, I was like this. I could not put this down. I was on a live stream for Becky at Bex Reads channel because this is actually their October book for the book. I always have it wrong. The Black Hat Coven book club. It's their Witchy book club that I love, and I'm guest hosting this, and I'm actually hosting a live discussion of this book, and I can't wait to talk about it. But everything that happens in the last 20% was jaw-dropping to me. That is the most satisfying story I have read in a long, long time, but it is quite graphic, and I would consider this a horror, more in the graphicness of it, not in like jump scares or really big tension in the way that you might think your typical horror would be. But there are some really vivid scenes that I could picture in my mind, and it was quite visceral experience, but I loved it. I ate this up. I thought that this was quite good. I'm not sure if I will try anything else by Brom, but I would love to know if you have recommendations. I just don't hear about his other stuff as much. I've heard some mixed things about Krampus, but I'd be curious about it because I just think everything about this book is kind of grossly beautiful, and I loved it, and I can't wait to discuss it, and I would love to hear all your thoughts about it as well, if you've read it, of course. And then one of my favorite authors, she never misses, A Haunting in the Arctic by C.J. Cook. This feels very different from her other stuff, like the Lighthouse Witches and the Ghost Woods, but I think I could still be able to tell it was her. I just love her range. Nobody does atmosphere like she does. This follows two storylines. One is very modern, it's 2023, and the other is more historical, and you see how these two storylines parallel each other, which is something that she tends to do. In all her books that I have read, she does that kind of thing, and that just works for me. If it's done really well, it can go off the rails and not work, but I think C.J. Cook does such a good job at that. I would highly recommend the audiobook for this. The narrator is Scottish, so you can't speed it up too much, at least I couldn't, but I thought she did a brilliant job. It really helped with the immersion experience. And I just have to put a content warning out there for SA. The historical timeline has a lot of that. We're following a woman who wakes up on this whaling ship surrounded by men. She doesn't know how she got there, and we find out why she's there, and let's just say she's horribly mistreated, and it's difficult to read about. But it's how a woman of this time, if she found herself on a ship like that, would have been treated and looked upon by men. So it felt very honest and raw and realistic, but difficult. So I think that is hugely important to know before you pick this up. The modern timeline was actually really interesting to me. I thought I would be more into the historical timeline because that just tends to be true for me in stories like this. But I enjoyed them both. We were following a woman who has a TikTok, so that is something I'm reading about more and more of in books, and that can be very hit or miss. But it makes sense in this case because she's like an explorer, and she finds herself at this shipwreck site, and she's using TikTok to gain an audience and talk about everything. She runs into some other people. They also have skills that they do lives on TikTok and are getting more media attention, but you know something's not quite right, and I'll let you discover that for yourselves because you really need to read this. I thought that this was brilliant, but maybe I'm biased because I think everything that she does is brilliant. I just love CJ Cook so much. So there we go, we're caught up. Those are the 3 books that I've read. I'm in the middle of a few things now, so hopefully I'll come back to you soon. It is actually Halloween, so it is the last day of October, and I've been terrible, so bad about updating this vlog throughout the month, but that is just because I had something like lingering in my mind, and that has seemed to have resolved itself, so hopefully I will be better in November. So I do have 4 books to talk about. Thankfully, I have a lot of thoughts about them, so they're still strong in my memory. Well, this first one, there's not too much to say, it's just a cute book. It is Shady Hollow by Juno Black. I'll start by saying I will be continuing on with the series. I think that this is a perfect series for me personally when maybe I feel a slump coming on, when I need something easy and comforting and I know what to expect. I can see myself turning to this book. I loved it. It is cozy mysteries where the main characters are woodland creatures, and that concept sounds silly, and it is, but it works for me. I know that's not going to be for everyone, but I think just that simple setup, you will know if that is going to be for you. And we get all of the typical characters that you might expect in a more traditional cozy in this, and the author actually gives you like a character map at the beginning and describes who the characters are and kind of their demeanor, and I loved that. And at the beginning, a toad that was part of this community but not very well liked is found murdered, and everybody in the community is a suspect. We are following, our main character is a fox, and she is a news reporter, so she kind of gets wrapped up in the case. The detectives in this are bears. I think it's a moose who owns the coffee shop, so it's just kind of fun. And all these creatures who, in our world, could not get along and live this way do in this book, and it's just a good time. I actually wanted to read you the author's note because she wraps this up perfectly. It says, Shady Hollow is a tale of woodland creatures, and from time to time, the contemplative reader may pause to wonder precisely how a town functions with foxes and rabbits as tenants of the same building, or how a mouse and a moose can chat eye to eye. Keep in mind, gentle reader, that this is a work of fiction. The characters' resemblance to real creatures, alive or cruelly murdered, is incidental indeed. For those who feel compelled to resolve this issue before continuing with the story, you may wish to think of the characters merely as humans with particularly animalistic traits. In other words, just like you and me. With that guidance, welcome to Shady Hollow. So there you go. She sets up your expectations perfectly. I think that little piece gives you a taste of her writing style, and I just devoured this. I thought that this was fantastic. And there are quite a few books in the series, I think 4 or 5 now, and I can't wait to continue on with them. It's just one of those books that warms your heart. You really can't say too much more than that, but yeah, I think you know if this is going to be something you like before you pick it up. I haven't read a ton of thrillers this year, but if I'm going to pick up a thriller, it's going to be S.A. Cosby, and I'm so excited that I finally got to All Sinners Bleed. This is heavy, and I think I've come to expect that from S.A. Cosby, but it was fantastic. One thing I want to say is I highly recommend his audiobooks. Whoever the narrator of his books is, I need to look that up. They are fantastic. I just think that that narrator really brings the story to life, and it's not often that I get into this point where I just want to do things around the house so that I can have an audiobook on and listen to it, and I need to know where the story is going. This is just your standard crime thriller, but it does some things different, and it's important to know going into this one that it does open up with a school shooting. We're following Titus, who is the first black sheriff in this town in Virginia, and we get some of his backstory of how he ended up back in his hometown, this small town, why he ran for sheriff in the first place, and how different people within this community treat him now that he is sheriff. I just need you to know that this gets pretty dark and disturbing. If you can't handle things about children, I wouldn't pick this up, because we see why the shooting happened in the first place when Titus goes through the phone of the teacher who was murdered, and it's dark. It's a lot. As I said, I couldn't put it down, but there were moments where I had to pause and just reflect on it and sit with it. I think that was true for Razorblade Tears as well, but I would say that this one is heavier, probably because it involves children. It's pretty graphic in descriptions of people's deaths in this one and how bodies are found. I didn't see the ending coming. I just thought it was really well done. I think that S.A. Cosby is beyond talented, definitely an auto-buy author for me. One of the few thriller writers who I still turn to and know that I'm going to enjoy his stuff. He just does things that are very powerful, haunting, feel very real and authentic, and I think he's got a really great voice. And I think if you put some of his work in front of me, I'd be able to tell you that was something by him, which I think is a talent on its own. So if you are like me and you're not that big of a thriller reader and you can handle some darker content, I would suggest trying S.A. Cosby. I then read Mary by Nat Cassidy, and this is one that I've been curious about. It was always in the back of my head. I almost put it on my October TBR officially, but I just wasn't sure that I would get to it. And to be honest, I was a little intimidated by it for some reason, but then a friend on Discord kind of talked me into it very easily. She can talk me into reading things pretty easily, and I know that she knows who she is and she will comment on this video, especially since we are going to buddy read Nestlings in November. So yeah, I finally listened to Mary, another one that I think I would highly recommend on audio. I loved the narrator. She does character voices, like the way that she does the aunt in this book is incredible, really brought that character to life. So this is a very loose Carrie retelling. I really appreciated Nat Cassidy's author's note at the beginning of the book and at the end. In the beginning, he's talking about why he chose to write a Carrie retelling and how that book meant a lot to him growing up and how the story has been in his head since he was a child. It is a very loose Carrie retelling. And in a lot of ways, it also felt like Bloody Mary, you know, that tale Bloody Mary. I kind of felt that vibe as well. And we are following a woman named Mary, and she is 49, turning 50. There are a lot of conversations about menopause and being perimenopausal, which is so interesting considering that a man wrote this. I think that he handled the plights of women very, very well. I mean, I have not gone through menopause yet, but you can tell that it's something he really thought about and talks about in the acknowledgements at the end, and I really appreciated that. But this is pretty horrific while also kind of being funny. I think that the aunt in this, as awful as she is, she grows on you and she's hysterical. So there's that lightness if you need it, even though it's quite gruesome. So at the beginning of the book, Mary is living in New York. She works at a bookstore. She lives a very quiet and isolated life. Her awful aunt calls her and says, "I'm dying, you need to come back home." Her rent in New York is going up. She has lost her job, so really she has no choice. She returns back home and she's realizing that she has no memories of her childhood at all. And as she's spending more and more time in this town, things are being revealed to her. She's seeing things in the mirror. She's going to doctors to try and figure out what's going on with her. They're all just telling her that she's perimenopausal, that this is very normal, just ignoring her concerns. And I think that is something that happens to a lot of women. So I really liked that. And you're never gonna guess where the story was going. I had so many theories, and I think that's part of why I liked this as much as I did. I had so many outlandish guesses about what was really going on here, and they were all wrong, and I could never have guessed what actually happened, and I thought that that was kind of fun. If you were intimidated by it like I am, I don't think you have to be, but you do have to be prepared for some grossness. In some ways I feel like it's like Slewfoot, where Nat Cassidy does a really good job of writing descriptions where I could really visualize what was happening, which it was both a good thing and a bad thing. This one really surprised me and was perfect for October. Myself and everybody else this month read The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I grew up on Britney Spears. I was such a Britney Spears fan, and reading this made me realize just how much women in the music industry were pitted against one another at that time, and I'm sure that still happens. I know that still happens today, but like the Team Britney and Team Christina thing was next level. I bought into it. I was Team Britney. I would not listen to anything Christina Aguilera put out, and it's kind of like sick. Like you couldn't be fans of both. but I was diehard team Britney. My friend and I growing up would pretend to be her when we put on performances, and the one song we always sung was Lucky. And I don't know why we were so attached to that song. It's a really sad song, but I think if you listen to the lyrics of that one, I mean, it's pretty in your face. She's not subtle with the lyrics in that one. It made me understand her even at a young age. So as she was going through everything that she went through and talks about in this book, I feel like I always understood her and I always got that. It was so nice to hear her tell her own story in her own words and to get the chance to just talk so freely. And this just felt really Britney to me. I just always had been attached to her. I've always loved her. I've always, as I said, had an understanding of her, but now that is on a deeper level. I thought Michelle Williams did a great job with the audiobook of this as well. It's kind of sad because she talks in the end about how great her husband is, but now aren't they getting divorced? So that's kind of sad. But yeah, I just like that she laid it all out there. She didn't hold back. She didn't care who she upset. I was never an NSYNC fan, but yeah, I don't know how Justin Timberlake recovers from this one, to be honest with you. And her family was obviously awful. So yeah, I'm just so happy that she got a chance to tell her story and that this is doing so well. So this is the only celebrity memoir I have read so far this year, but I really, really liked it because I just like her. So yeah, that is it. Those are the books that I read in October. I'm trying to think of which one was my favorite. It's probably, well, I know what it is. It has to be The Witch Would Not by Olivia Atwater because that's one of my best books of the year. It's just so me. But I had some real winners this year, like All the Sinners Bleed. So I truly had some standouts this month, and I thought it was overall a successful October. I had some vampires, some witches, so I feel like I covered my bases in here. I wish I did read A Dark Academia. I still didn't pick up Vita Nostra. I just didn't get to it. Makes me mad. But my least favorite was the Monsters and Muscles, Muscles and Monsters. Just really didn't gel along with that one, but overall it was fantastic and I can't complain. So let me know what your favorite book in October was. Can't wait to see what November brings. Thank you again for your support. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.